The argument started like most of our arguments with my sister Jessica announcing another milestone in her corporate career. She'd just been promoted to senior marketing director at Morrison & Associates, complete with a corner office, company car and $120,000 salary. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart," Mom gushed, refilling Jessica's wine glass. "A corner office at 28. Your father and I always knew you'd be successful." Dad nodded approvingly from the head of the dining room table. "That's what happens when you make smart career choices. Stable company, good benefits, real growth potential." I continued eating my dinner quietly, used to being the invisible third wheel at these family celebrations. At 31, I was the disappointing older brother who still lived at home, who spent his days playing on computers, instead of getting a real job. "And the best part," Jessica continued, "is that Morrison & Associates is expanding into digital marketing. They're looking to acquire some of these little tech startups to boost their capabilities. Easy pickings, really. Most of these garage operations don't understand real business." That's when Dad turned his attention to me. "Speaking of which, Michael, how's your little computer project going? Still losing money?" I looked up from my plate. "It's going well, actually. We just completed beta testing and we're ready to launch." "Launch what exactly?" Mom asked with that tone she used when talking to children about their imaginary friends. "Remind us what this business of yours actually does." "We've developed an AI-powered customer service platform that can handle complex inquiries across multiple languages and integrate with existing business systems. The beta results showed 300% improvement in response times and 95% customer satisfaction rates." Jessica laughed. "Michael, that sounds like nonsense you made up. AI customer service? Everyone knows those chatbots are terrible. No real company would use that. Actually, several Fortune 500 companies have already expressed interest after seeing our beta results." "Which companies?" Dad interrupted, his voice taking on that familiar skeptical edge. I hesitated. The NDAs I'd signed with potential clients prevented me from naming them, but I couldn't explain that without sounding like I was making excuses. "I can't disclose that information due to confidentiality agreements." Dad slammed his hand on the table. "Of course you can't. Because they don't exist. Michael, you've been living in this house for 3 years, spending all day in that room with your computers, burning through what little savings you had, and you have nothing to show for it." "Dad, that's not true. The company is valued at." "Valued by who?" Jessica interjected. "Some imaginary investors?" "Michael, I work in marketing. I understand business. What you're describing isn't a real company. It's a hobby that's gotten out of control." Mom reached across the table and patted my hand condescendingly. "Honey, we love that you're creative and interested in technology. But at some point you need to face reality. You're 31 years old. Most people your age have careers, mortgages, families. You can't keep pretending that playing with computers is going to make you rich." "This isn't playing with computers," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Innovate Tech Solutions has been in development for 3 years. We have proprietary algorithms, patent applications, and genuine interest from major corporations." Dad's face was getting red now, the way it did when he was building up to one of his explosive outbursts. "Innovate Tech Solutions? You gave your pretend company a name? Michael, listen to yourself. You sound like a child playing make-believe. The technology we've developed could revolutionize customer service across multiple industries." "Stop!" Dad shouted, standing up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "Just stop with this fantasy. You don't have a company. You don't have employees. You don't have customers. You have a laptop and a bunch of code that nobody wants." "Richard, please," Mom said, though her tone suggested she agreed with him. "Let's discuss this calmly." "No, Linda. I'm tired of discussing this calmly. I'm tired of watching our son waste his life on this delusion. Michael, you're embarrassing yourself and embarrassing this family." Jessica leaned back in her chair, watching the argument with obvious satisfaction. She'd always enjoyed these moments when I was the target of Dad's disapproval instead of her. "Dad, if you just let me show you the beta test results." "I don't want to see your fake test results. I want to see you get a real job. Apply to real companies. Morrison & Associates is hiring in their IT department. Jessica could put in a word for you." "I don't want to work in IT support," I said quietly. "You don't want to work at all." Dad exploded. "That's the problem. You want to sit in your room playing video games and pretending you're some tech entrepreneur. I'm not playing video games. I'm running a business. You're running nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing but a 31-year-old failure living in his parents' house. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd heard Dad's criticism for 3 years, but he'd never been quite that brutal before. Richard, Mom said weakly, that was harsh. It's honest, Jessica said, emboldened by Dad's outburst. Michael, you need to hear this. You're not an entrepreneur. You're not a CEO. You're an unemployed adult living at home and pretending that amateur programming is a career. I stood up slowly, my dinner half finished. I understand you don't believe in what I'm doing. There's nothing to believe in. Dad screamed. Take your failure business and get out. I'm done supporting this nonsense. You have 1 week to find a real job and start paying rent, or you can take your laptops and your pretend company and find somewhere else to live. The dining room fell silent except for the ticking of Mom's antique clock on the mantel. Jessica was staring at her wine glass, probably regretting that Dad had escalated things quite this far. Mom was looking back and forth between Dad and me, clearly torn between keeping the peace and supporting her husband. Fine, I said quietly. I'll pack tonight. Michael, Mom started, your father didn't mean. Yes, I did, Dad interrupted. I absolutely meant it. I'm not enabling this fantasy for another day. I walked upstairs to my room, the same room I'd lived in through high school, college, and now for 3 years while building Innovate Tech Solutions. The walls were still decorated with posters from my teenage years, making the whole situation feel even more pathetic from the outside. But those posters were looking down on something Dad and Jessica couldn't see. A sophisticated development setup with 3 high-end monitors, server equipment humming quietly in the corner, and whiteboards covered with algorithms and business projections that represented 3 years of 18-hour days. I started packing methodically. Laptop, external drives, development notes, legal documents, patent applications. Everything that mattered for the business fit into 2 large suitcases and a backpack. Everything that represented my actual life's work for the past 3 years. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Kim, my co-founder and CTO, who'd been working remotely from San Francisco. Final contracts came through. Tech Global signed this afternoon. $2.3 billion acquisition closes Friday. We did it, man. We actually did it. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, perfect timing. I'll call you in an hour. I finished packing in silence, listening to the muffled conversation downstairs where my family was probably discussing how they'd handled the Michael situation. I could imagine Jessica explaining to Mom how this was really for the best, how I needed tough love to face reality. As I carried my bags downstairs, Dad was waiting in the living room with his arms crossed. I hope you understand this is for your own good, he said. Sometimes people need to hit rock bottom before they make real changes. I understand, I replied, hefting my laptop bag over my shoulder. Where will you go? I'll figure it out. Mom appeared from the kitchen wringing her hands. Michael, honey, maybe we can work something out. If you promise to start looking for real jobs. It's okay, Mom. That's right. It's time for me to move on. Jessica emerged from the dining room, probably feeling guilty about how the evening had unfolded. Michael, look, maybe I was too harsh. I could talk to some people at Morrison & Associates. There might be opportunities in our tech consulting division. Thanks, but I'll be fine. I walked to the front door, then turned back one last time. For what it's worth, I love you all. And I hope someday you'll understand that I wasn't pretending. Dad's expression softened slightly, but his voice remained firm. I hope someday you'll thank us for this. I drove to a hotel downtown, checked into a suite, and immediately called Marcus. Dude, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours. Tech Global wants to announce the acquisition Monday morning. Their PR team needs our approval on the press release. Send it to me. I'll review everything tonight. Are you okay? You sound weird. Just had an interesting conversation with my family. They kicked me out for running a failure business. Marcus was quiet for a moment. They kicked you out? Tonight? 3 days before we become billionaires. They don't know about the acquisition. As far as they're concerned, I'm a 31-year-old loser who plays with computers in his childhood bedroom. Jesus, Michael. That's brutal. It's actually perfect timing. I was getting tired of pretending to be unsuccessful. Over the next 3 days, I worked with Marcus and our legal team to finalize every detail of the acquisition. Tech Global Corporation, the largest customer service software company in North America, was acquiring Innovate Tech Solutions for $2.3 billion in cash and stock. Marcus and I, as co-founders, would each walk away with $1.1 billion after taxes and employee payouts. The irony wasn't lost on me. For 3 years I'd been living at home not because I couldn't afford my own place, but because I was reinvesting every dollar back into the company. My failure lifestyle had been a choice. I'd been living like a broke college student while building technology that was about to make me one of the youngest billionaires in the state. Friday morning, I was in Tech Global's corporate headquarters signing the final paperwork when my phone started buzzing with calls from home. The press release had gone out at 9 a.m. Eastern, and apparently the local news had picked up the story. I let the calls go to voicemail and focused on the closing documents. By noon it was official. Innovate Tech Solutions had been acquired for the largest tech deal in state history. That evening I was back in my hotel suite, reviewing job offers from 3 different Silicon Valley companies who wanted me to lead their AI development teams, when there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Mom, Dad, and Jessica standing in the hallway looking like they'd seen a ghost. "Michael," Mom said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We saw the news." "What news?" I asked, though I knew exactly what they meant. Dad cleared his throat. "The news about your company being sold. For $2.3 billion. Oh, that." I stepped aside to let them into the suite. "Yeah, the acquisition closed this afternoon." They filed in slowly, taking in the luxury hotel suite with its panoramic city views and premium furnishings. Jessica was staring at everything like she was in a museum. "Michael," Dad said, sitting heavily on the couch, "I don't understand. The news said you're the co-founder and CEO of Innovate Tech Solutions." "That's correct. But how is that possible? You were living in your childhood bedroom. You didn't have an office, employees, revenue." "Actually, I had all of those things. I just didn't have them in ways you could see." I opened my laptop and pulled up a presentation I'd shown to investors 6 months earlier. Innovate Tech Solutions has been operating for 3 years. We have 12 full-time employees working remotely across 4 countries. Our beta clients include 6 Fortune 500 companies. Our AI platform processes over 50 million customer service interactions per month. Mom was staring at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. "But you never told us any of this." "I tried to tell you. Every time I mentioned the company, you dismissed it as playing with computers. Every time I tried to explain what we were building, you told me to get a real job." Jessica leaned forward. "But Michael, you were living at home. If your company was so successful, why didn't you have your own place?" "Because I was reinvesting everything back into the company. My living expenses were essentially zero, which meant every dollar of revenue could go toward development, equipment, and hiring the best talent." "You mean you chose to live at home?" Dad asked, his voice hollow. "I chose to bootstrap the company instead of taking venture capital funding. Living at home was part of that strategy. It let us maintain complete control over our technology and our vision." I pulled up another slide showing our revenue growth. We've been profitable for 18 months. Last quarter, we generated $47 million in revenue.
The room was completely silent. "So when you said you had confidentiality agreements with Fortune 500 companies?" Mom started. "I meant actual legal agreements with actual corporations. Microsoft, Amazon, IBM, Salesforce, Oracle, and Cisco have all been beta testing our platform." Jessica's face had gone completely pale. "The customer service AI you described at dinner is currently handling customer inquiries for some of the largest companies in the world. The 300% improvement in response times wasn't a projection, it was actual measured results from live deployments." Dad put his head in his hands. "Michael, I'm so sorry. I had no idea." "How could you have known? You never asked to see what I was actually working on. You just assumed that because I was living at home and working on computers, I must be failing. But the way you dressed, the car you drove, the fact that you never seemed to have money." Mom said, "I drove a 2015 Honda Civic because it was reliable and economical. I dressed casually because I worked from home. And I didn't spend money on things because I was focused on building something bigger." I closed the laptop and looked at each of them. For 3 years, you've been embarrassed by me. You've introduced me to people as your son who does something with computers. You've suggested I needed to grow up, get serious, face reality. We thought we were helping, Dad said quietly. You thought I was a failure. And rather than trying to understand what I was actually doing, you decided I needed to be fixed. Jessica finally found her voice. Michael, we made a terrible mistake. We judged you based on appearances instead of results. You judged me based on your own limited understanding of what success looks like. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Do you know what the hardest part was? It wasn't the 18-hour days or the technical challenges or the stress of building a company. It was coming home every night to a family that treated me like I was wasting my life. How can we make this right? Mom asked, tears in her eyes. I turned back to face them. You can start by understanding that success doesn't always look the way you expect it to. You can stop assuming that because someone's path is different from yours, it must be wrong. Dad stood up slowly. Michael, I owe you the biggest apology of my life. I called your life's work a failure. I called you a failure. I was completely wrong about everything. You were wrong about the facts, but you weren't wrong to be concerned. If I had actually been a 31-year-old playing video games in his parents' house, your intervention would have been appropriate. But you weren't playing video games, Jessica said. You were building a billion-dollar company. I was building something I believed in, something that could make a real difference in how businesses interact with their customers. The $1 billion is just how the market valued that vision. Mom wiped her eyes. What happens now? Do you move to Silicon Valley? Do you start another company? I'm not sure yet. Tech Global wants me to stay on and lead their AI division. I've got offers from other companies. Or I might start something completely new. Whatever you decide, Dad said, I promise we'll support you. And I promise we'll never again assume we know better than you do about your own life. I smiled for the first time since the dinner argument. That would mean a lot to me. Jessica stood up and walked over to me. Michael, I'm ashamed of how I treated you. I spent 3 years condescending to you about business while you were building something I couldn't even comprehend. You were protecting your parents from what you thought was me taking advantage of them. I understand the motivation. But I was so arrogant about it. I assumed that because I had a traditional corporate job, I understood business better than you did. Traditional corporate jobs are important too. The world needs both kinds of success. But the world doesn't need people who tear down others for choosing different paths, she said. Over the next hour, we talked more openly than we had in years. I showed them the actual technology we'd built, explained how the AI algorithms worked, and walked them through the customer case studies that had convinced Tech Global to make their offer. By the time they left, something fundamental had shifted in our relationship. They were seeing me clearly for the first time in years, and I was seeing them more charitably than I had since the night they'd kicked me out. 3 months later, I bought a house in the hills overlooking the city, not because I needed to prove my success, but because I finally felt ready to put down roots somewhere permanent. The house came with a home office where I could work on my next venture, whatever that turned out to be. My family visits regularly now, and our conversations are completely different. Dad asks thoughtful questions about technology and business strategy. Mom has become fascinated by the intersection of AI and customer service. Jessica and I have started collaborating on projects where her marketing expertise complements my technical background. Most importantly, they've learned to trust that I know what I'm doing with my life, even when it doesn't look like what they expected success to look like. The night Dad kicked me out, he said he hoped someday I'd thank them for forcing me to hit rock bottom. In a strange way, he was right. Being rejected by my family for my failure business was exactly the catalyst I needed to stop caring about their approval and start focusing entirely on building something extraordinary. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to an entrepreneur is having everyone around them believe they're destined to fail. It removes all the pressure to play it safe and gives you the freedom to pursue something truly revolutionary. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who doubted you are capable of learning from their mistakes and growing into better versions of themselves. My family did exactly that, and now our relationship is stronger than it's ever been. The last text I received from Dad simply said, "Proud of you, son." Always have been, even when I was too stubborn to show it. That message was worth more than the $1.1 billion acquisition payout. Some things really are more valuable than money, like having a family that finally sees you for who you really are.